my name is Teemu, and I said I'm going to present to you about our work on how we can use application layer Middlebox protocols to peek into networks that are not accessible. So as we know, the end-to-end connectivity in the internet is not given. So we have network boundaries, such as local networks, which are not accessible from the internet. So in case of an external adversary, this boundary will stop, for example, network scans. However, in some cases, it is necessary that an external entity can contact our internal hosts. So, for example, here is a BitTorrent which requires in its active mode that someone from the internet can connect to your client. So that's the short motivation. We are gonna go through two types of protocols. So first of all, proxy protocols, where you as a client will ask the proxy, could you please open me a connection to a remote host? On the other side, we have NAT traversal protocols where the client will inform the gateway that could you please open me a port and forward all incoming traffic. So the difference here is that the proxies themselves are non-persistent and short-lived, so they are just only active as long as the connection is active, whereas port forwards are based on adjusting the firewall rules, and they are more persistent. So our question is, an idea is that what if we would use these protocols to peek behind these networks that are otherwise hidden? I'll give a short introduction to universal plug and play, which is probably something everyone in this room has. So you have devices in your local network that are UPnP compatible. UPnP is used for zero configuration networking, meaning that you, as a client, let's say in this case BitTorrent client, it has no information about where is the gateway or anything else. So he will simply ask over multicast on the network, hello, who is there? And as a response, the devices supporting UPnP will respond that, hey, I'm here. Here is a URL you can use to fetch more data about me. We are interested in gateways in this talk, and I'm gonna we can simply ask then from a gateway that could you show what sort of services you are providing to us, and as an answer you will get a list of services and list of endpoints you can use to control this gateway. So back to our BitTorrent case, we are simply asking, could you please forward a port for me? And the router will adjust the firewall rules and do this forward. So it happens to be that there are UPnP devices that are exposed to the internet, even though this should be only locally available. Instead of trying to do port forward, instead of trying to do port forwards on these exposed endpoints, we develop an approach using the same interfaces that I used for these port forward controls. So first of all, we will go and discover all these exposed devices, followed by filtering out the devices which support the services what we are interested in, and then we are going to go and iterate over all the existing forwards on these gateways. So as a first step, we use a modified CMAP on the internet, and the hosts which are exposed will simply respond as an UDP, showing the location where we can find more information about this device. In total, we found 2.8 million UPnP devices. These are commonly used for denial of service attacks due to their amplification factor. A majority of these speakers were not discovered by vanilla ZMAP because they answer from ports different from the 1900, which is the port we were contacting these hosts. So to our second step, we go and download this HTTP file, which contains information about the services. We find that almost 30% of these hosts were exposing also their control interfaces, not just the discovery interface to the internet. And the most interesting for us are these port forwarding controls, which were available on almost 500,000 hosts. And as a last step, we will then contact these services and enumerate over the existing forwards and collect information such as where the forwards are, where this gateway is forwarding traffic, what sort of traffic it is, what's the description, and so on. So it's just to show that there is not all of these gateways had active forwards, but we're going to go and investigate a couple of cases of forwards, what we saw there. So first group of forwards had the same description of Gaeta Silenciosa. Second one were actually not targeting internal hosts, which is the regular use of this protocol, but some external IP addresses. And the rest of the forwards which we consider benign. So what does this silent cookie do? Practically, these forwards were targeting each and every host on the internal network of this router on Windows file sharing ports. So the intuition here is that they are trying to exploit some services hosted internally in these networks. So we can see that this is already being misused in the wild. And the second step, we have external forwards. So these were targeting, for example, virtual service providers, or some edge, network edges for service providers like Google or Amazon. That could be used, for example, for domain fronting in order to proxy the traffic. The second set of external forwards were targeting other vulnerable devices. So other devices we were able to fetch these forwards, likely to chain traffic through these. And the third one was targeting DNS servers. The reason for this is likely to masquerade DNS traffic for amplification attacks. And the last one are the benign forwards. So these are chat software, such as WhatsApp or torrent clients. So to conclude, UPnP is everywhere. It shouldn't be accessible to the internet. And we showed how Internet Gateway device allows control of port forwards and is actively misused. What actually is done by ISPs, generally they are simply blocking the discovery, which will alleviate this issue. And this ends the first part, and I'm going to then shortly describe how do we do similar, how do we again look into some hidden networks using internet proxies. So we did an extensive analysis of proxy ecosystem in order to find open proxies. In total, we found some 700,000 proxies, but only a really, really small amount of them are really open proxies, which came a bit surprising. What we do here is we use these proxies, these open proxies, and try to use the HTTP connect, which is basically used for to pass TLS traffic over a proxy. So this is a HTTP standardized action, which will tell the proxy, could you please form a TCP connection on the given host and given port. And in this case, we are targeting SSH port, and when the proxy, or we targeted all of these ports because they are binary yielding, meaning that we need to simply connect to them in order to find out if they are returning something to us. And we complemented that with HTTP also. So what happens here is, in case the proxy is able to establish a TCP connection as requested, it should be returning 200, like regular HTTP response. We saw that 40% of all our proxies were responding to us with this 200 response code. However, we also wanted to see that whether we are receiving the expected payloads. So whether the connection was really for the service hosted on an internal host. So in this case, we used heuristics, port-based heuristics, and found out that 23% of all open proxies allowed connections to the local host. And this is actually already end of my talk. So we showed a couple of different types of protocols which can be used to cross network boundaries and were misconfigured. They could be leveraged by adversaries. In our case, we were doing internet measurements and doing this from outside the internet, but these protocols can obviously also be misused from internal hosts. And with that being said, I thank you for your attention, and I'm open for questions.
Hi, Victor Boschak, Leuven. For the proxy study, you mentioned that these proxies are quite volatile. That these proxies are quite volatile over time. Do you have any insight into how long such a proxy stays alive?
Yeah, so what I mean, they are not really volatile. What I mean in this non-persistent is that when you use a proxy, you as a client, you form a TCP connection to a proxy gateway. And as soon as this TCP connection gets closed, it won't be proxy in the traffic anymore. So the port forwards, they are firewall rules, and they are basically there as long as they get removed. So that's the difference between the proxies and the traversal protocols.
Okay. So the results would stay stable over time?
Yes. So this was just from a single scan. So we scanned multiple common proxy ports, and we tried to find as many open proxies as possible. We complemented this by using something called proxy crawler, which crawls open proxy lists. But these are like the open proxy lists. They are probably not stable. The proxies themselves, we saw, or several of these closed proxy implementations or deployments were actually hosted in a few on a few networks. So like 50% of all proxies, what we discovered, were hosted on top 5 outermost systems. So they seem to be done by ISPs, and yeah.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
So could you discuss some ethical concerns and how you deal with it in this project?
Yes, so ethical concerns. We deliberately avoided to try to touch the systems behind these gateway devices. So for example, in the case of proxies, we simply try to connect to the local host, and we try to keep these checks as minimal as possible, meaning that we go for try the connections for SSH, which will immediately give us a banner and we can disconnect. And the same applies for SMTP and FTP. For the NAT traversal protocols, we did the precautions that are commonly used for internet-wide measurements. So we host a website on our scanning server. We have a whois entry, which shows our abuse email address, and as soon as someone reports, we try to exclude them for our scans. So those are basically how we try to manage this ethical concern while still getting results from it. Okay, you're welcome.